All right, guys, what is up? My name is Evan, and welcome to Ansible. Welcome to Ansible and why you need it in your life if you're doing stuff like Fred's doing, or me, is running a lab. So, first about me. I'm a Windows and network security enthusiast, enjoy of anything automotive, and as for the amount of time I have, I don't know how much I have to spare. But anyway, go follow me on Twitter. I don't post much, but it's occasional. So what is Ansible? So Ansible is a program that helps for automation of configuration, patch management, and deployment of software. It's honestly really cool. It uses the concept of inventories, roles, playbooks, and modules, all of that which will be covered. All it uses is SSH or WinRM and Python. That's literally it. It can run on anything, really. It can control anything. Also, it uses Jinja for templating, which honestly makes it really nice because Jinja is so universal. You're able to just be like, hey, I've learned how to use Jinja with Flask. Same thing applies when doing Ansible templating. So, what is a role? So a role is just a collection of playbooks and other files for one particular task. Let's take an example of a company with a piece of software that has to be installed the same way across every server. You just create a role for it. It's like role named install some proprietary software. That's all it's needed. And then inside that directory, there's a tasks folder, templates folder, everything else to support that role. And then when you're just within your master playbook or running it ad hoc, you just say, deploy proprietary software, tell it what the hosts are, so what your inventory is, and just go. Next, what is a playbook? So playbooks are actually really nice because they're written in YAML. So YAML is among the JSON. You'll hear YAML and JSON are like the two biggest names of storage mediums or file types when doing configurations. Well, YAML, JSON, XML. But YAML, especially in the concept of playbooks, it's very readable. If you look, I took a screenshot of some example. This is just installing a server, installing a web server, granted. And you could easily tell what's going on here. So where it says name, HTTP service, state, we can read that and be like, oh, so this is doing something along the lines of systemctl start HTTPD, systemctl enable HTTPD. So it's really easy to just translate what each task in your playbook is doing. So when you're writing out your tasks, because playbooks are comprised of tasks, each one delimited by name, then you have what's called the module. So the module is very specific. You can almost translate it to commands. Going back to the example of HTTP service state, we have the service module. What the service module does is exactly what it says, controls services. And then the arguments to service, name, state, enable, just to name a few of them, more useful ones. And that's how you build out your playbooks. So now we're starting to drill into how Ansible does what it does. We have our role. We've written a playbook for the role. And now we need to talk more about modules. And it's we have modules to do so much. An example is host names, setting host names, adding groups, doing Git, file management, what else? Blocking files, so taking a file, regexing to a certain line, and then replacing or appending to that line. Really, there's an Ansible module for anything you're trying to do. No, there's also Windows-specific ones for when you're doing this against Windows hosts. And then the documentation, you go to the docs page, and it gives you all of the arguments required to run it and any optional arguments for doing practically what you can do from a command line. And if there isn't a module for it, and nobody from Ansible Galaxy has written a module, you can either write a module yourself and upload it to Galaxy, which is like Ansible's community platform where people upload playbooks, modules, and all that. And you can write your own in Python and upload it. Or there's the command module, which is literally just piping a string input into Bash or ZSH or whatever the default shell on your system is. On top of the modules and the argument parameters, there's also in the docs it gives examples on how to use it and then what the output is. So the nice thing with Ansible is you can have debug output or just taking variables defined from when it executes and then just piping that output straight into the terminal. It's honestly really nice, and it makes it very easy for when your playbook fails to just drill down into what's causing it to fail. So now we go into an inventory. So the inventory is where you define your host. So from your playbooks, you tell it what host you want to do this against, but in order to figure out that information, you have to get it from the inventory. So you just throw all your hosts into an inventory, but you can do it in some crafty little ways because let's say you're on a corporate domain with 50 web servers and they all have the host name www01 to www50.example.com. You can just use this bracket notation and it will do the full range. So that's one line to define that whole range of hosts. So it makes for really clean and really concise inventory files while still making it easy to define what host you're trying to impact. So these web servers are the www01 to 50 are under the group name of web server. So in your Ansible file, you just say hosts, web servers, and it will run against all of these. So to make it even more dynamic, you specify variables. So in a file called group vars, you can just throw in a bunch of variables and reference that in your templates and in your playbooks. So using the Jinja double curly brackets, you can just take your variables and throw it in. And so like, let's say you're dynamically doing host names. So you're spinning up new boxes and you want to define host names. Just put that in the group vars file and then just call it right here. Makes it so much easier. Example, which is very relevant, is competition deployments. When you're trying to deploy against multiple teams, the use of variables makes it so much easier. So this is all good, but what if you just want to test your connection to it, or you just want to get some quick information? Well, you can do that with Ad-Hoc Commands. So Ansible Ad-Hoc allows you to just type a one-line command that specifies the inventory, that specifies what you want to accomplish, and the hosts that you want to perform it against, so your inventory file, and it'll just run it and output it straight into standard out, right into your terminal. So like if you just want to get the host name of a bunch of IP addresses, because let's say you're writing a report or something and all you have is IPs and it's all nicely put in your inventory file, just ad hoc and then call shell, so the shell module, and then pipe in to the shell module the command host name and specify your inventory. Done. You have all your host names. So demo time, I guess. So I've spun up a bunch of servers. So to start, we're going to just that ad hoc command that I was talking about. So for a little reference, I have this inventory file called runinv. I was trying to do Windows, but certificate issues, and I just couldn't run any Ansible because WinRM was not accepting my connections. So we're just doing Linux for today. But anyway, so we have this list of IPs, and it's all specified under Linux. So I'm going to run this command. So I'm calling Ansible, telling it I want to do Linux. I'm calling the shell module. So I'm telling it just run this as a normal command. And TAC A is giving it the parameters, so host name. I'm telling it what inventory I want to run it against, because you can have multiple inventory files with the same grouping. So I could have an inventory file that has Linux somewhere else. But the way to distinguish that is to tell it which file to draw from. I'm giving it the user I want, so in this case, CentOS, and then I'm specifying my private key. So that takes care of authentication. So give it a few seconds. And there we go. We're getting output from all the IPs what their host names are. Another example is if we want to just get the host file, so catting Etsy hosts, that can be done as well ad hoc. No need for any kind of complex playbooks. Done. So now let's actually run against all these hosts just a basic Nginx WordPress install. So we have this folder here, which is defining WordPress Nginx. We go into the roles, and we can see defined MySQL, Nginx, PHP, FPM, and WordPress. So these are the individual, these are the roles that comprise, in essence, the other role of WordPress Nginx. So so there's this level of hierarchy inside your playbooks and inside your roles. So you can have it defined to where it's like, yes, my end goal is Nginx, but I need all these other tasks to be done. So you can just have that inheritance of like, run all this, and then this is installed. So it's controlled by site.yml. So in this playbook, even though it's a universal site file, is you specify roles. And what it will do is it will run those roles, common MySQL, in order. So if it's, let's say it's gonna run the Nginx. So it goes into Nginx and it finds the tasks folder, because here it's defined the role of Nginx, and inside we have our templates, handlers, and tasks. So it goes into tasks and it searches for a file called main.yml. That is the primary playbook for any role. So then it goes into here and it's just like, oh, hey, cool, install. And then copy the config file and then notify restart. So what that's doing is it's notifying a handler. So it goes into handlers and then restarts the service. So a handler is a way of doing a little bit extra without defining a new task. So let's go ahead and run it. I just have this to copy paste. So it's telling you what the play is, so what's going to be happening, and then it runs through gathering facts. So what it does is it does some preliminary setup to where it goes out to all the servers and it tries to get information about, most commonly, just Python, because that's all it needs to run on the guest machine. And it failed. The demo gods aren't happy with me today. So it's not liking the fact that I'm attempting to elevate. So can't run this playbook without spending the time to do some editing, but at least I was able to show you guys ad-hoc commands, and the concept pretty much stays the same. It just goes through each individual task. So from here, you'll just see task and then the task name you defined. So like here, copy Nginx configuration for WordPress. It'll show up task as that and just say, okay, fail, fatal, among the lines. It's honestly something, Ansible is something really cool, and all it is just a pip package you can install. It's built on Python and it uses Python. It's a nice little utility to just have sitting on your personal device, so that then it's like, if you get into a situation where it's just like, oh, I got 3 servers I need to configure in this way, you can just write up a playbook and then just run it once and just watch the output. It's really cool, and it's something that I always keep around with me. But anyways, questions?
How would like a person with minimal experience in like, say, for like virtualization, how can they get into like using Ansible?
It's for minimal.
Behind someone who's coding.
So,
Not kidding.
so if you haven't really done much with Ansible, it's kind of hard unless you just have a bunch of old laptops and desktops lying around because you can just have it run against one extra computer. Let's say you got an old laptop sitting around. You can just define your inventory file as an inventory of 1. And then you can just write a playbook and just run it against an inventory of 1 and it'll work fine. So if you don't have access to any form of like high-end virtualization or anything, or even a home lab, you can just run it against 2 boxes and it'll work just the same.